are honored to have.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah, it's recorded, so be careful. So today we are honored to have a distinguished panel of
Don't lie
experts.
down, Milo.
I'm sorry. Is anyone have any questions?
I think it was just a.
Okay. So yeah, again, please mute. Otherwise there will be multiple voices from the webinar. So today we are honored to have a distinguished panel of experts. We have Professor Kim Colvin, Dr. Yong Luo, Dr. Kelly Woolley, and last but definitely not the least, Dr. Sandra Sweeney, to share their insights on the key skill sets and qualities they look for in a job seeker when making hire decisions. But thank you all for being here today. To kick off the meeting, let's begin with some brief introduction from each of our panelists. We will go in alphabetical order. So Professor Kim Colvin, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm in my 11th year as an associate professor. Well, not my 11th year as an associate professor, my 11th year at UAlbany, associate professor technically in educational and counseling psychology, but I'm in the division of ed psych and methodology. So that's where our stats and psychometrics people are. And I've been department chair for the last couple of years. So I've had lots of experience in hiring, both serving on search committees and serving as the department chair who does the actual decision making with the dean and the negotiations with the new hire.
Thank you, Kim. And the next one is Dr. Yong Luo. Hello, Yong. Can you tell? Yeah.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Yong Luo. Like Hongyu said, I'm currently a psychometrician at Pearson. Here we call psychometrician RS, research scientist. I joined here since the end of 2023. So it has been more than almost 14 months. Before this, I worked at a bunch of places like Prometric, American Nurses Credentialing Center, Saudi Arabia, ETS, and NWEA. I was a hiring manager in my previous job and have been lots of interview panels in my current job. So it's my honor to be here to kind of share with you my 2 cents. Thank you.
And the next is Dr. Kelly Woolley.
Hey everyone, I am Kelly Woolley. I'm the manager of our measurement scientist team at the American Board of Internal Medicine, or ABIM. Our measurement scientist team is the psychometric research group at ABIM. We also have an operational psychometric group, but my team is the psychometric research team. And I've been with ABIM for about 8 years, ever since I graduated from JMU. And I think the experience that I'm bringing to this panel is based on many, many years of experience on hiring committees for operational psychometricians, for measurement scientists, for exam developers, for exam innovations developers, a number of different roles at ABIM. That's mostly the experience I think I'm thinking about for this panel. But in addition, I also have a number of years experience hiring for our summer internships, which is similar, but not exactly quite the same thing, I think, is what we're talking about here. But I'm looking forward to today's discussion and to learn from the other panelists. So thanks for the invitation and opportunity to be a part of this.
Who will be here today? So the next is Dr. Sandra Sweeney.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm Sandra Sweeney. I am an operational psychometrician with Cognia. And I've been with Cognia going on 3 years now. I run also our externship program at Cognia. So as Kelly had just said, that's a little bit different than the conversation we'll be having here today, but I wanted to point that out in case there are any grad students here who have questions along that side of the hiring process. So I'm involved in the hiring of our externs every year and run that program. And then I'm also currently functioning on our hiring committee for our open psychometric position and upcoming positions, hint, hint. And so I am happy to share with you all my experience in those spaces and answer any questions.
Thank you all. I think we have a really good combination of panelists from academia, panelists from industry, and also panelists who have industry like Kelly, but who's hiring people with research background and hiring other position is measurement scientist, with more like research oriented position. So thank you for introducing yourself. Now we are moved to our Q&A session. So let's start with 4 questions. Q&A session, we have 4 questions. So the first question I want to ask is, what advice do you have for candidates looking for stand out in today's competitive job market? So we know that ChatGPT can be a great assistant for the applicant to polish their resume and the cover letter. But what strategy would you offer or advice you would offer to job seekers to ensure that the application get noticed? Because it feels like every day everyone have the very similar applications, resume and cover letter. So yeah, what advice would you like to offer? So any volunteer want to start from this question?
I can jump in quick, just from our public institute standpoint. If we have an applicant who is qualified for the position, we have to go through and read it and score the CV completely. So I don't think we might not have the same problem other people do. But one thing that really is jumping at us right now, just with budget crunch, is who can teach the widest range of courses for us. And even if it's not a measurement position, who has stats background. So even if we're hiring them for a literacy position or something else, that they'll be able to teach some stats courses for us.
The teaching can be something like highlight or make the candidate stand out. Yeah, anyone from the industry want to speak up this moment?
I can, similar to I think what Kim is sharing, if there's a concern that, with these new AI tools, applications aren't getting read, that's certainly not been my experience. And at least with like the measurement scientists and psychometrician roles, we're reading every application we get. And so I don't want folks to be concerned. And again, this is just my experience, but even when we're getting like over 100 applications, every single one's getting read. So I wanted to allay that concern a little bit because it sounded like that was a little bit of part of your question. I don't think I have any good advice on like standing out, even though it's gonna get read. The only things that came into mind are, have your CV and your cover letter be organized and the most important information stands out. One of the ways that I wanted to suggest folks could think about this with their materials is have someone whose opinion you trust review your CV and kind of do a think aloud, or have them say like, what did you pick up on this from like, and you could even say with a minute or with 2 minutes. Because I do think sometimes having materials that are skimmable and the most important information that you as the applicant really want someone to get, if someone can get that quickly, that's really good. And that's, yeah, I think if you give some thought to what you want to stand out and then do a check and see, is someone whose opinion you trust, does that stand out to them too? That they're kind of getting that at a summary level.
It's like a second opinion from someone who probably have been in the industry for a couple of years, or maybe have your advisor to look at the same platform. Yeah, that's a very good advice.
If I may, I want to piggyback on what Kelly said. I based on my experience, I don't think that's really an issue. So actually, I think now it's getting more and more challenging to find people in our field. Somehow I get the feeling like fewer and fewer students are training in measurement. So when you open a position, you get like 400 applicants. 90 of those will be claiming they are in data science, not exactly in psychometrics. So everyone who actually got trained in psychometrics, who took courses in IRT, we'll make sure we're gonna give them a screening call and interview them. So I don't think that's a problem. I guess regarding like a CV and cover letter, just make sure you're, typically I'm applying for multiple positions, right? Make sure you are sending the right cover letter to the right organization. So this happened to me like more than 10 years ago when I was applying for an internship. I sent to the wrong organization, and to this day I'm still wondering. I still haven't heard from them. So just make sure you don't, mix that up. Thank you.
And
I
also
will.
maybe, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry. You had a
No, I
comment?
just trying to quick summarize what you say here. So maybe customize your resume or your cover a little bit to the specific position. So instead of making a general one, make different versions for different positions. Is that what we're trying to also trying to
Especially the
offer?
name of the organization you're addressing, right? I think that's a key part. The other part can be more generic, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very good. Very, very
Yeah.
important.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
Sandra?
I'll
Mhm.
jump on this same train. I agree with a lot of what other folks are saying, and just as a reminder, so similar to Yonglyu, I'm speaking from an operational psychometric experience when I talk about positions here, less so the academic and research side. But for us, I've seen that same kind of trend in our applications these days. You know, we will get 150 applications, and 90% of them will not even be in a measurement related field, you know. So what we do is if we find those applications that are in that measurement related field, we'll take a look at them. We're not going to just screen them out or anything like that. That being said, I will say in general, expect your application to be screened. It is not necessarily by an AI. It could be by a human in an HR department or something like that, but it will go through an initial screening because we can't possibly interview 150 people, right? So you have to expect your application to be screened, and the way to kind of get through that initial screening is just to make sure that your application is speaking to the job requirements and education requirements, right? So if it calls for a PhD, you know, in our case, a PhD in psychometric, whether you're still a grad student and you have an expected line next to the PhD, that's fine. But if it calls for a PhD, you should list the PhD on there somewhere, right? So it'll get screened out if we don't see that. And so those kind of initial things. And then also, if you have, like we do, when you submit your applications, there's a couple of small questions that get asked. That's usually like yes, no questions, that kind of thing. Those are screener questions, right? So if you're not sure whether answering a yes or a no to that question would get you kicked out at the screening stage, and people have done this, and this is perfectly fine. You can find somebody on the hiring committee for the company. You can find them on LinkedIn. People find me on LinkedIn all the time. Send them an email and question. Be like, you saw this question on the application, and you were just curious about it, and that's perfectly fine to do. So those questions will be screener questions to help out with that initial look through. And so I think that's important to get you through the initial screening. And then outside of that, I would say, much as what the other folks have said, you really want the pertinent information to stand out. So top third of your resume is where that should be. One thing that I find frustrating when I read so many of the resumes is you want to list everything you've ever done and really try and stand out that way. And that's great, but organize it so the relevant information is at the top, right? So if you have particular experience, research, training that's relevant to this position, get that to the top, have a relevant education or relevant work experience section, and then you can add the other stuff in additional work experience or something like that. And that just helps out a lot with being able to weed through some of that. So just a couple of thoughts there.
Thank you. And Sandra, I have a follow-up questions. So based on the experiences, what is the proportion of the application will be left after the first round of screening? Will send to you after the first round of screening? Like what percentage of application will survive?
Was that question specific to me or the panel?
Yeah, to you. Yeah.
Okay. So it depends. You know, it depends on what they come through, and you know, it can. The survivability of that initial screener is pretty much based on those initial screening questions. So again, this is specific to our experience as operational psychometrics here. But for example, we are not in a position to be able to hire folks who require work sponsorship, right? So if your answer to that question is yes, I need work sponsorship, that's automatically going to screen you out. The proportion of how many gets screened out or how many gets kept just kind of depends on all of those kind of answers to those questions. But I will say, we're currently hiring, and I think in the last couple weeks, we've probably received upwards of 200 applications. And I've probably looked at about 87 of those. So, more than half got screened out. And in some cases, what happened is folks will email me and say, I applied and I'm just following up because I haven't heard anything. And then it's an application I haven't seen. So I'll go to the HR department and I'll ask, where is this application? And then usually they will come back and say, this one was kicked out at the screener, and they will give me the reason. And then I'll go back and tell the applicant that. So even if you don't hear anything, you can always follow up and we can check in on that.
Thank you. That's very useful advice. Follow up. So yeah, some levels of work sometimes. So I think we have really good advice from our speakers for the first question. I will move on to the second question. So the second question is, what common mistake do job seekers make on their resumes or during interviews that may cost them the job? So I really like this question. So yeah, any volunteer want to start from this question?
I would just say know basic information about the organization or school you're applying to. Definitely look at their website, because we've had people come in, or especially during the initial phone interview, you realize they haven't even Googled us, or they don't just know the basic information, because that's really a red flag. That tells us you're not that interested in us, so why are we wasting our time with you? Let's say, so that's one thing that I would mention.
So how about during interview, someone get to the final interview and they make some mistake that is not supposed to do? Can you give us maybe some examples or a fun story?
We did have someone who was, let's see, how do I put this? They were telling us how they left a job after 3 months because they really wanted to go back and work for someone else, and it was only a 1-year position, and she was trying to put a positive spin on something that wasn't that positive, and that wasn't working. So maybe test out some of those things. If you have some interesting job jumps in your history, know how to explain them.
Yeah, I'll jump on that train for sure, Kim. So we've had a couple of times during an interview where I'm going to call them discrepancies is what kind of pops up. The person is talking in a certain way, and they either contradict themselves at some point during the interview, or, and this is important to note, when we get to the point of interviewing somebody, we're gonna go look around at this person, and you should expect that. So if you're saying in an interview that you're at a certain company, but we can't verify that, that's problematic. And I think in a lot of times people aren't necessarily trying to be deceptive. They're just they're worried about something that they might perceive as a negative piece to their experience, like a gap somewhere or something like that. And I want to put it out there that it is more important to kind of be upfront about those gaps and that kind of thing. We're all human, we all understand this thing, as opposed to trying to obfuscate it and then getting yourself into hot water, because now we're not sure what's real and what's not real. So if you know you have those kinds of pieces missing or something, as Kim had said, rehearse or think about how you would respond if that came up in a question. It doesn't have to be extremely involved, but don't try to obfuscate things or contradict yourself, because that raises a red flag for sure. And just one of the other things I wanted to mention on a common thing that happens in the interview phase is we inevitably get to the part of the interview where we will ask the candidate if they have any questions for us. And when somebody just straightforward says no, that is a red flag for us. Similar to, again, either you haven't done your research on the position and on the company, or you're not really interested. That's what's implied when you just say no. There are no questions. So I always advise having a good 3 to 5 questions jotted down, and they don't have to be complicated questions. They could be as simple as, what is a day in the life look like at your company, or what is the culture of your team? They could be very generic in that sense, and have a few of them, because usually what will happen is during the course of the interview, maybe you have a couple listed and they already get addressed in the course of the interview. So having a few backups is always good to have there, but that is one common thing that I see will sometimes happen. And the other, less common these days, but common among, I think, new graduates who are stepping into the field for the first time, is when we start off the conversation and we ask about, sharing some of their background. That is your professional and educational background we are asking about. We've had situations where folks will talk for 15 minutes, starting with, I
Sure.
was born in, and moving
Too
forward.
much information.
Yeah, and part of that is nerves, right?
Mhm.
But again, have 2 or 3 bullet points that you want to kind of point out there.
Mhm.
That was thought.
Yeah, that's very, very important. Like very, very important. I think just trying to quickly sum up your what Kim and Sandra said. So first, if I had like gap between job, probably you need to give a very reasonable reason why you have so many gaps, and also be honest. And also show your interest to the job, show that you have done research, and also give on point information about yourself. Do not share too much information that's not relevant to the job positions. Yeah. How about you and Kelly? Do you have anything you want to share?
Sure. I was thinking about kind of the different phases, and I think my short answer to what are the things that would kind of automatically get you kicked out? I don't think there's anything that's like automatic, you're out right away. So I think my answer is more about things that aren't as great. So one of them, I think Young mentioned earlier, a different company's name on the letter. I'm going to keep reading. We all make mistakes. I'm not going to stop reading your materials, but it doesn't look great. I think we've seen some examples recently where I think folks forgot to take out the ChatGPT prompt in their cover letter, and it's like, at least sure, we're using tools, we're all using tools, but hide your tracks a little bit better, maybe. So again, I'm not going to stop reading your materials, but it's not great to see stuff like that. And then I was thinking about, either we do kind of like a virtual first call before we might choose to bring you on site. And in that virtual call, something that I find challenging is when folks have prepared statements and are kind of just reading from a prepared statement rather than having a conversation. And we all take notes. I have notes right here that I'm looking at, but I've seen a number of folks kind of ask a question and then they'll go over and just start reading word for word. And that's at that point, I've read your written materials. I really want to get to know you. I want to hear how you are in conversation. So it's a little bit of a different thing I'm trying to assess at that point. And so even though you might have prepared a really nice statement, it's not really what I'm looking for at that stage. And then I think some tricky things that I've run into when I've seen a number of folks come in kind of for the on-site interview is sometimes there's like a reluctance to either give full answers or kind of give like a yes or no quick answer and not elaborate. Or avoid questions and not want to answer a question. I think sometimes it's tricky when folks avoid questions that are kind of negative, like what strengths and weaknesses, and they kind of avoid the weakness, or say something I sometimes ask is, based on what you understand of this job, what do you think are going to be your favorite parts, and what do you think are the parts that aren't as exciting to you? And I think some folks sometimes don't want to answer the second one. And so it's good to have a critical eye and to be able to share that feedback. So I think those are some things that came to mind. But again, I really don't think I've, fortunately, knock on wood, seen okay, automatically that one thing and now you're out. Yeah.
So yeah, I have a question about avoiding questions. So what if a job applicant who's feeling he doesn't know the answer, and he just need time to think about it? What would be the best way to respond to a question if he no idea what to say?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair to not have an on-the-spot answer. I think something I would appreciate is someone kind of thinking a little bit aloud or kind of thinking through, here's kind of my thoughts, but I would want to think about that more. I think engaging or trying a little bit goes far rather than just,
Silence,
uh,
awkward
yeah,
silence.
yeah. I think, I want to hear how you think. I want to hear how you approach problems. I absolutely do not expect you to have an answer to every question.
Thank you so much. And Yun, do you have anything on to say right now?
Yeah, I just wanna say like be cognizant, like whatever you put on the CV is fair game, in the sense like, if you understand like, everybody's nature is try to make your CV look as impressive as possible, especially for, you're fresh out of school, you haven't done much, you wanna put all the things you've done there, but make sure you can talk about each of them intelligently. So you have a first author paper. I would expect you should be able to talk about that. Otherwise, I'm like wondering how come you become the first author, right? If you're a second, third author, do not expect they're not gonna ask you. So then in that case, we will be looking for like, do you have that intellectual curiosity, right? You are involved in that project. You might not be the main, driving force of that project, but you should have that curiosity to understand the whole thing to be able to talk about it intelligently. Because intellectual curiosity is a key property that allows you to keep learning and becoming better and better in your career. So just make sure you can talk about them and do not just say, "Oh, I did this and that. I do not know anything else," because that would be a big red flag.
Yeah,
Thank you.
get to know everything you put on the resume. You just have to be prepared about it. Any question about information you list on your resume. Yeah, thank you so much. So I think we can move to the next question right now. So the next question is, how do you assess if a candidate is a good fit for the role and the team? How can a candidate assess if they're a good fit at the organization? Kim?
We're actually not allowed to think about that or discuss that as a search committee anymore. And I think it's moving away from maybe that was perpetuating having faculty keep looking like ourselves and not hiring, people of color, people of different backgrounds. So that's something we are expressly forbidden from talking about. So we talk about, the fit part is, how are they a match to the job? And that's really all we talk about. But I know that was definitely a practice in the past and other people do it.
So don't worry, Kim. I have one more question for you. Design for you. We created a question for you at last. So, but thank you for sharing. Yeah. Anyone want to jump in this question?
I think similar to Kim, this question is kind of difficult to answer in the way it's phrased. Maybe I think our main consideration, at least in our current hiring committee when we're looking at stuff, if we're hiring for the professional role, full-time job, which is separate from an extern or an intern type position, right? So if we're hiring for that full-time professional job, what we're really looking for is a match between knowledge and skills of the job that the person is going to be doing. In our case, we're looking at operational psychometrics, and because we work primarily in the state summative side of things, we're going to be looking to make sure that there is some technical know-how along the lines of CTT and IRT, right, for example. So that's like one of the things we'll look for, and my advice on candidates assessing themselves of whether or not they're a good fit would be really to look at one, the job description. What does it say you're going to be doing? Is this something you're interested in doing? Is this something you feel would work for you? And then considering the audience, and by audience I mean both the company you're working for and who that company serves, right? So is that company serving like in our case, K-12 students, right? Or is that company serving the military or any of these kinds of things, thinking about those audiences, and then assessing for yourself whether you think that might feel like the right place for you. But some of this happens in the conversations, right? Once you start getting to that interview and you have those conversations, this is, I think, Kelly might have mentioned this, or one of the other panelists. Once you get to that point, you're trying to get to know each other. And it's not just about us getting to know you, it's about you getting to know us. So again, asking those questions, that I think will help with that part of it.
I think really it's really important. So I have a question. So do you think study the culture, company culture is also a good way to know if it's a good fit to the candidate? Yeah, question to Sandra.
Again, it's kind of a difficult question to answer as, looking at the company culture, because even that culture can be different in different departments. But you could certainly ask if you're at the interview stage. That is a question you can ask about what the culture is like or what the team dynamic is like, maybe that you're going to be working on. And again, this is going to be different too. So in our case, we work remotely. The psychometrics team are all remote. They're all over the country. So that's a little bit different than if you're on site and in offices and be able to talk next to each other and that kind of thing. But I think if it's important to you, then you should ask those questions and evaluate for yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, so Yuan Luo, do you want to answer these questions? Yuan, Kelly, do you want to jump in? Yeah.
Since Sandra is talking about state testing, I'm also working in state testing, probably can piggyback on that. I think, in the interview, I typically, when I was on the interview panel, I typically look for two things. Number one, this person logical reasoning ability. Okay. So as a psychometric training, you're going to ask, it's going to show, but what I think is important is logical reasoning ability. I think that's the thing that allows you to be able to learn quickly, connect dots, and be successful. So that's something I would like to, so for example, I remember like in one of the interviews, the candidate was talking about, they were using 2PL model and running mental health as a diff method. And I was like, wait a sec. Mental health was for 1PL model, you assuming your factor is the same. Why did you do that? I was not deliberately trying to give that person a hard time. I was trying to, given that kind of a curveball, how are you going to come up with a good logical answer, right? So also another thing I typically want to look for is whether this person quickly gets defensive or not. Because especially in state testing, you face the client sometimes with a tag to say, technical advisory council. Sometimes the questions might not be the most friendly tone. So if you quickly get defensive, that's not going to help with the conversation. So those are the two things I typically look for in that process. Thanks.
So what if a candidate is not doesn't get defensive, but need a lot of time to think about your question? Are you willing to give time to the candidate to think about craft the answer to your question?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's better than just immediately getting defensive, right? But I would be, if I were making the decision, would be like, this person might need lots of training before we can put them in front of the client, right? Sometimes the client's talking to you, they need a quick answer. You cannot give me half an hour and let me get back to you. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? So that kind of say, maybe this person is better suited for a behind the scenes psychometrician, that kind of thing. But that doesn't automatically just disqualify that person. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Kelly?
Yeah, I think similar to what Young was just saying, one of the things that's going through my mind when I'm thinking about fit, and I really appreciate that the way you framed this question was like, there's two sides to fit, right? Do we think you're a good fit for this role? And then do you think you're a good fit for this role in this organization? I think from assessing fit on my end, I'm thinking about what are the responsibilities of the job, what would this person need to do in this role, and assessing not necessarily like thumbs up, thumbs down, do they have them, but say what are they going to walk in with versus what is something that we would need to support and grow over time. And like that's more of where my head is at for fit. Like what are the things they walk in with on day one versus what are the things that like we'd need to grow over time. And then how does that compare across different candidates? But I think on the other side, which is really important for applicants to figure out, like, do they think they're going to be happy in this role and this will be fulfilling and something they'll find valuable doing? Um, it's hard to know, right? Before you know that role. Of course, if you have colleagues or peers in that organization or that role, ask them about it. Something else that I sometimes find helpful is if you can figure out like kind of a compare and contrast across different roles. 'Cause I think that helps you highlight the special things about a role or how, there are a lot of research and operational psychometrician roles in our field. They're not all the same though. So how do they differ? So I think sometimes if you have colleagues at different places, if you can kind of elicit what are the differences in your roles, that could help you see what is specific about this role and would that be fulfilling and would I find that work valuable? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. So if you like review hundreds of applicant like cover letter and resume at the same time, what would the best way for you to find out if the candidate fit for this position? If like you need to review so many applications at the same time.
I think some of that, fortunately, I think as my colleagues were saying, there's some quick like, okay, this person doesn't have training in our field whatsoever. That's kind of an easy first category into a different category that weeds out a significant number of folks. And so then you can focus on, all right, the folks who have expertise and training in a field related to ours or in our field. I think that's a smaller group. And then at that point, I'm thinking about what are the specific things that I think they really need to walk in with, which is, usually a degree or close to a degree and then coursework in certain topics and experience doing research, things like that. And then I think really just thinking about what are the specific things this person would need to do in this role, and then looking through the applicants and determining where they have experience already versus not quite yet. An interest too.
So it's cover letter or resume is like the candidate is telling a story about themselves, and you're just and you're assessing if the story fit to the role that you're posting, you're hiring.
Yeah, because we of course want to hire really, really great colleagues, but we also want them to be happy in the role and like the work. No one wins if we hire someone great, but it isn't really for them. So yeah.
Hopefully, if I may piggyback on that.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I just I kind of want to, I will relate to what Kenny said. I mean, the cover letter and CV is really more suitable for us to like flag out people who definitely not gonna fit the role. Whether they're really gonna fit the role or not, I think.
Yeah, but you can interrupt.
You're gonna gain.
Microsoft project is gone. You don't
Sorry?
have access from here anymore.
I'm sorry if your audience, could you please mute?
Yeah, it's mute. Yeah, I guess what I say, you gain much more information when you interview that person, interact that person than the cover letter and CV, because they have time to prepare for those. And nowadays with ChatGPT or DeepSeek, you have no idea how much is really originally from them, right? That's something I want to add in there. Thanks.
I totally agree with you and piggyback off of the same thing. For us, that initial review is really about weeding out who's really, not a fit. And by that, I don't mean, I mean, when we get an application, we're hiring operational psychometrician and somebody applies and they have a PhD in chemical engineering, or something, and they have no work in the field at all. So it's more about weeding out those folks. And then our process normally is anybody who has training in a related field or in our field or anything, we automatically go to a first call with them. And that first call will just be a half-hour long, and it might be with one or two members of the psychometric team, because what we have found a lot of times is that people can look different on paper. and come across differently in that conversation. And that's really what that conversation is about. I've often been pleasantly surprised. I get the resume. Yes, there's some training, and my initial impression is maybe not the person for us, but we're gonna give this person a call because they have the qualifications. And then I'm pleasantly surprised. We have this conversation, things come out that's not on their resume or in their cover letter, and the opposite has also happened, where everything looks really good on paper, and then you get in that conversation, or like, wow, this is not what I was expecting at all. So we will weed out people who clearly have none of the training needed, but even if they have training in a related field, we'll have that initial conversation, and that's your opportunity to also, have an initial view at us and see what you like.
Yeah, just to quickly sum up what our panelists just say to answer these questions. So I think first is doing research, ask a question, know what is the specific information of the role, and also when you come, like as you say, if the interviewer asks them some question that caught you off the guard, don't be defensive, and take your time and carefully answer the question. I think we have one more question to go, and I'm sorry, Lisa.
That's fine. I just thought I would jump in right now with the two questions that have been asked in the chat because I feel like they're relevant to this topic. The first one was, is it possible to get a position in measurement with a master's degree in quantitative psychology? If any of the panelists can comment on that.
As some testing company, they hire data analysts, or they call that statistical analyst. Definitely, if you are really good with coding, I think that's definitely a possibility. Actually, I think that might make it even more desirable because you know some measurement. But if it's like a psychometrician, I don't know about certification. I don't know much, but especially at the state testing level, especially when they need to bid for some contract, they would like their all psychometricians to have a PhD level. But in terms of a statistical analyst, I think that actually make it very, very attractive having that measurement background.
Yeah, I agree with that. Same on our end. If the role is for a psychometrician on our end, that requires a PhD. Again, because we work in that state summative space, and that's the expectation for when we bid on contracts. However, it's always helpful if you have a master's in something related. I would reach out to those committees and check with them, because, like, for example, in our case, we might have an open position right now for a psychometrician, but we have a department that's a data analyst department or reporting department that does all these things. And a lot of times what will happen is folks might start there and then move their way into psychometrics and eventually do the education while they're at the company. So there are paths there, so I wouldn't completely discount it, but if the requirement is asking for a PhD, there's usually a reason that we're asking for that particular
So coding is a very important skill set.
It's absolutely important. It's critical even, I would say, at both levels. I think the question was just sort of asking about that distinction between having a master's degree versus having a PhD, if I understood the question correctly. So I just wanted to address that.
Thank you. So Lisa, do we move to the next question, or?
I'm gonna ask you one more. I just got recent advice that a student should build their program, their research coursework, etc., based on the job they are aiming for. But I would like the panel's thoughts on this. I think I have an all over the place student in mind when I'm asking that question. So how focused should the experiences be related to the job of interest, or is a broader experience also viewed positively?
If I may, I want to say, like, if you want to work in a testing company, you're thinking about all the operation psychometric activities you are gonna do there. Like, let me think about the item analysis, differential item functioning, and dimensionality assessment, IRT calibration, knowing some factor analysis, IRT model, SEM doesn't hurt. But I I guess, after 4 or 5 year graduate school, it's hard to call yourself a specialist. The way I look at that is like you are kind of a entry level generalist. Then you work in the testing company for like 10, 20 years. You develop special interest, say in standard setting. You really dive into that. Then you kind of call yourself a specialist. But that's my definition, whether you're thinking of yourself as generalist or specialist. Yeah.
Thank you. That was helpful. Does anyone have anything they want to add directly to that? I'm just being cognizant of time. If there's anything unique to add to that, I'm happy to hear that.
I think I would just say, general is fine, all over the place was the term I think used. Is fine. Each company will teach you what you need to know about that company's specific processes. Again, speaking from an industry operational side of things. So we're generally not too concerned about that.
Now you can go to the next question.
I think we will still maybe have some time. Let's see. Yeah, so the question is about publications. So how important are prior publications? What type of publications are important? For academic research or position, how important is teaching experience? So let's start from Kim. This question is for you.
So, for us, we do want, if we're hiring someone for a tenure track position, we want them to get tenure. So the publication record coming in is important. And faculty who've been here a long time are saying that they're surprised by our applicants now have more and more publications. It used to be just a couple, now it's many. So that is becoming important. And the types of publications, I guess we would prefer to see, not theoretical or thought pieces, but more, research-based or experimental work.
So how about, and also I remember you said teaching is a very important experience.
Yes, we do want to see teaching experience and the ability to teach a wide range of classes too, and both undergrads and graduates.
So do you want to see maybe different classes they have teaching, or maybe just more focus on one, say, RT class? Do you want to see a classes?
We know it depends on the position. We know probably if they're a current grad student, they might have only taught one class, but the ability to teach several classes would be attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So do you also value the presentation skills as well?
Yes, when they come and do their job talk, we're also thinking about this person is going to be in the classroom. So I think, I can't remember, but maybe it was Kelly saying we don't want to see them just reading from their notes. We want to think about, this is how they would be teaching also.
So, so besides publication and teaching, are there any experiences or skills that you're also looking for in academia?
We're also looking for people who could teach about how they would be a mentor, both for doctoral students, maybe master's students. And since we have more and more undergraduates in our school now, how can you use undergrads in your research?
So do you have any candidates who have more than 20 publications or a lot of publications?
Not 20, but we might have some in the teens for people who've had postdocs. Definitely people who are coming from another institution, but people with postdocs are getting close to 10, maybe in the teens now.
Seems a lot.
I would not have gotten a job.
Okay, thank you for sharing. And for other panelists, Kelly, do you want to share your insights?
Sure. I think publications are nice, presentations are nice. The way I think about them, though, is coming from a perspective of hiring someone for a research position is that gives me evidence that you can finish a project. You can do a whole research project from start to, the dissemination stage, and through some peer review process, whether it's conference or journal, has decided that it was at least, the halfway decent, good job, let's say, and it was a good thing to do, and you did it well. So the way I see publications and presentations at conferences is like, good, you have experience starting and completing projects. That's great. That's more of how I look at it from more of like an industry research perspective.
It shows that the candidate get their work done.
It's measure perseverance, right, Kelly? That's an indicator of perseverance, right? I think that. So I do want to piggyback on that. That's something I have realized is like when you actually chat with a candidate, you only have 30 minutes. Sometimes with a panel, it's like 1 hour with 4 or 5 people. It's really hard to assess this person's coding ability. So if this person has a publication on some relatively technical stuff, say they propose some MCMC sampling algorithm and they coded it that way, that would you really add lots of weight because I know this person can code. I know lots of the work in the testing company requires like data management, data wrangling, and automation, right? So that would add tremendously. But other than that, other things, really like I think I would say like most of the folks working in testing companies don't care much about the publication,
For operational work, but operational position.
Yeah, maybe some research like I know like ETS they have some research psychometrician, maybe they value that more. But if it's like really operational psychometrician, I would say it's more like fast paced, get the things done, in a what's that MVP minimally viable way, stuff like that. It's more about that. But having it is better than nothing, right? For sure.
Right.
But if not, I would say if you have very limited time, try to improve your coding ability. I think that's more important than having a publication like a empirical study or apply a diff method to a data set, which to me doesn't add that much weight in terms of your showcasing your capability there. Yeah.
So it's more about the skill sets that can be reflected from the publications. The skill sets
Exactly.
is more valuable.
Something hard to assess in interview, like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. Speaking from an operational psychometricians, we're not that big on the publications. I mean, we'll take a look at them for sure and be able to converse about them, but it's not a key thing in the operational psychometric work.
So I think we still have 3 minutes. Maybe we have time for one more question. Ellie? Yes, sorry, Lisa.
Yeah, I think this is a big question, and requires, I'm sure you've thought of it in your companies, but we have a first-year student at James Madison, and my research and GA work so far has been centered on equity in education, a focus I plan to continue. Given the change in U.S. administration, I'm curious about the challenges or shifts you anticipate in hiring and retaining professionals who prioritize equity in their work. And I don't know if people have good full answers to this, but I'm sure it has entered your spheres. So if anyone would like to comment on that.
We've been lucky that our university and SUNY has said we plan to continue our work with DEI. That's still important. It's important for hiring, and we want to have a teacher force that is diverse, and so we want to keep including a diverse student population. So that's still important for us. I think we're all worried about what is that going to mean for federal grants that universities rely on. But at this point, they still want us to go forward with that kind of work.
Same at ABIM. We recently our CEO and president affirmed we'll continue with our work on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and not anticipating changes right now.
I think it's a little different in the industry.
You do have anything to add?
I would say if I were you, you're interested in that and try to combine that with a certain aspect of psychometrics, say like measurement invariance or depth, right? Especially with now the AI development, like I think large language model can play a big role in terms of figuring out what is causing death. We know traditionally more than 90% of the time we do not know what causes death, right? So that could help. Also, I know like AI can help you define the membership, like the focal and the reference group in your diff study. All those things are like fascinating. I would encourage you to kind of explore those areas to combine with your, interest in that area. Yeah.
It's 3. So Lisa is like you're gonna decide if
Okay.
you continue or call it a day.
There's one question I would like the panelists to respond to if you have time, but if you don't, I certainly understand if you need to drop off. But the question is really to the people in industry, not you, Kim, sorry. But how many strong applicants are you getting for a position like that you really think these are really strong applicants? And this is from, academic side of like what can we expect for our students? Are you getting a lot for for a position, or it's really like 3 really strong people? Where are things at right now?
I would probably ballpark us for like strong applicants. I'd ballpark us to like 10, probably. And so that's a difference, just to clarify, from, the initial, if we get 130, some of them are dentists and some of them are physicians, and that's not counting that. And this is like a further honing down, focusing on the word you're using, Sarah, strong applicants. I would probably ballpark 10.
I see the same thing on our side. We've had a position open since I think end of November, and we've had a good couple of hundred of applicants. And again, a lot of those, like you say, I don't know. I guess people see the word psycho in there somewhere and you get all kinds of strange applicants. So discounting that, I probably would say in that time between the end of November and now, maybe we've seen 10 or 12 strong applicants. So
I have this feeling this applicant probably from the same pool. There are like overlaps between Kelly's applicants and Sandra's applicants.
So my experience is like I really get the sense now we have a shortage of psychometrician and training in this country. So I would say if you are in this area, I mean, if you really study hard, have good psychometric skills and coding skills, I don't think it will be difficult for you to find a good job when you graduate. That's how I feel about that. Because I look at it when I was a hiring manager there, I wouldn't even say I had like 2 strong candidates. Sometimes we had to hire from people with relevant background, but I wouldn't say that like super strong. And also like I chatted with my former advisor where I graduated, they were saying like back in your days, I graduated in 2013, that every cohort we have 7, 8 students. Now they have only 1 or 2. So I think there is really a shortage of psychometricians in training. That's how I feel about that. Yes.
And I'll add a little plug here. You know, like for example, the position we're currently hiring for asks for 3 years of operational experience. But if you're a grad student, I think this is something that grad students tend to do. They'll look at something and go, well, I'm graduating in the next month. I don't have that 3 years, so I'm not going to bother applying. Don't do that. Apply. Okay, because as you've mentioned, there seems to be a shortage of folks coming out. So even though it says that, you know, we will consider strong new graduate students. If the training is there, we will at least have that initial conversation. So, you know, if you're in the field, yes, apply.
Thank you
Lisa,
all
do you have any
so much.
follow-up question? Oh, sorry.
No, I just wanted to thank our panel. I thought this was a very successful webinar. We had the panelists. Thank you for your really thoughtful responses. I know I appreciate it. I know Hong Yu appreciates it, and I'm sure all of the participants learned a lot from you. So, you know, on behalf of NERA, I thank you.
Thank you. We are off to a good start.
Yes. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Have a
Bye-bye.
great rest of the day. Bye.
Thank you.
Lisa, can you stay for that?
I was going to.
Yeah. Bye, Kim. I think it's still being recorded.
Yep, I'll stop it.